He asked for everything in the divorce, and she said yes. The house, the money, the company. Then he pointed at their 5-year-old daughter and said, "Not her." And she still said yes. No argument, no emotion, just one condition. And that was the moment he lost everything. Because she wasn't giving anything away, she was setting him up. He had no idea. He thought he won. That was his mistake. And the craziest part? It didn't happen in court. It started the moment she agreed. The ocean outside the Miami mansion was unnaturally calm that morning, its surface flat and silent, like it was holding something beneath it, waiting for the right moment to break. Angela Brooks stood still by the glass window, her reflection merging with the pale sky. At 62, she carried a presence that didn't demand attention, but commanded it anyway. She was tall, her posture straight, her dark skin smooth yet marked with the fine lines of experience rather than age. Her short silver hair framed a face that rarely betrayed emotion, but her eyes, sharp, steady, calculating, saw everything. Angela wasn't the kind of woman who reacted. She was the kind who remembered and acted later. Behind her, footsteps echoed softly. Marcus Hale walked in without knocking. At 35, Marcus looked like a man who had mastered appearances. Tall, athletic, with a sharply defined jawline and carefully trimmed stubble, he carried himself with effortless confidence. His suits were always perfectly tailored, his watch subtle but expensive, his expression controlled. But what stood out most wasn't how he looked, it was how he moved. Marcus didn't hesitate. He didn't second guess. Every step he took suggested one thing. He believed he was always in control. He didn't greet her. He didn't look at her. He looked around the room, at the house, at the life he had already decided was his. Then he spoke. "Divorce. I want everything." The words landed clean. No anger, no emotion, just a decision. Angela didn't move. Marcus stepped forward slightly, slipping his hands into his pockets, his tone calm, almost bored, as if this were just another negotiation. The house, the company, the cars, all accounts. Each item sounded less like a request and more like a transfer. Angela slowly turned to face him. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. Then Marcus glanced across the room. A small figure sat quietly on the sofa. Ava, 5 years old. Ava Brooks Hale was small and still, her legs tucked beneath her as she held a worn, stuffed rabbit close to her chest. Her soft brown skin glowed gently in the morning light, her curly hair tied into 2 uneven puffs that suggested someone had done them in a hurry. Her wide eyes were fixed on the adults, not confused, not crying, just watching, listening. Marcus pointed at her without even turning fully. "Not her. She stays with you." Silence. Heavy. Angela looked directly at him. "Say that again." Her voice was calm. Too calm. Marcus exhaled lightly, annoyed. "She's a responsibility, not my lifestyle." No cruelty, no hesitation, just logic. And somehow, that made it worse. Inside Angela, something shifted, but it didn't break. It aligned. For a brief second, her mind drifted, not to pain, but to memory. The man Marcus used to be, or at least the man she thought he was. The laughter, the ambition, the shared plans. Then she looked at him now, and understood the truth. Marcus wasn't leaving her. He was extracting value. Angela's gaze flickered toward Ava, whose small hands had tightened around the stuffed rabbit. Then back to Marcus. And in that moment, Angela made a decision. Not emotional, strategic. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "You want everything?" Marcus smirked faintly. "That's the point." Something in the air shifted, so subtle it almost didn't exist, but it was there. Angela nodded once. No argument, no resistance. "All right." Marcus blinked, just for a fraction of a second. Something felt off, but he ignored it. Because people like Marcus didn't question easy wins, they accepted them. Angela turned away, facing the ocean again. Behind her, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. He thought it was over. He thought he had won. Angela closed her eyes for the briefest moment, and inside that silence, something far more dangerous than anger settled into place. Control. She didn't need to stop him. She didn't need to argue. She just needed him to take everything he asked for. Because some people don't lose when they're denied. They lose when they're given exactly what they want. And Marcus had just done something irreversible. He thought he was taking everything, but he never asked one question. Who actually owned it? She didn't fight him. She didn't argue. She just said yes. And that was the first thing that should have scared him, because people don't give away everything unless they know something you don't. Angela Brooks sat in silence across the table, her hands resting calmly on the surface, as if nothing had changed, but everything had. At 62, she had spent a lifetime learning one truth. When someone rushes to take everything, you don't stop them, you let them. Then you decide what everything really costs. You're giving him 90%? The voice cracked through the room. Daniel Reeves leaned forward, both hands pressed against the desk, disbelief written all over his face. He was in his late 50s, tall but slightly worn down by years of courtroom battles, his thinning gray hair combed back out of habit rather than style. His eyes were sharp, trained to spot traps and loopholes. But right now, they were searching Angela's face for something that wasn't there: hesitation. "This isn't negotiation," he continued, his voice tightening. "This is surrender." Angela didn't flinch. "Give him everything he asked for," she said. Daniel froze. No emotion, no resistance. That wasn't normal. That was the moment it changed. "But add one line," Angela continued. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "What line?" Angela's gaze remained steady. "He signs away every right to my daughter, forever." Silence fell hard. Even Daniel didn't respond immediately, because this wasn't just a clause. This was permanent. No custody, no visitation, no second chances. He had no idea. "You understand what this means?" Daniel asked carefully. Angela nodded once. He already made his choice. Her voice was quiet, but final. "And now I'm making mine." Daniel leaned back slowly. Something about this felt wrong, or maybe too right. He had seen desperate clients, emotional clients, angry clients. But Angela? She looked like someone who had already seen the ending. "All right," he said quietly. And that was the moment he stopped trying to understand and started following her lead. Across town, the energy was different. Marcus sat in a sleek, glass-walled conference room, one leg crossed casually over the other, his posture relaxed, almost bored. This wasn't stress for him. This was victory. Richard Cole sat across from him, flipping through the agreement. Unlike Daniel, Richard didn't show emotion easily. He was in his early 40s, lean, composed, with slick dark hair and a face that rarely betrayed thought. Years of corporate litigation had turned him into someone who didn't react. He analyzed. "You're getting everything," Richard said. Marcus smirked. "I know." But Richard didn't return the smile. He stopped at one page. "There's a clause." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "What now?" Richard adjusted his glasses, reading slowly. "She wants full termination of parental rights." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Good." Richard looked up. "This is permanent." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his tone colder now. "I don't want baggage. I want clean." No pause, no conflict, just removal. Something was off. Richard studied him for a second longer, then nodded. "Your decision." The signing room was quiet. Too quiet. Marcus sat down first, relaxed, confident. Angela sat across from him, composed, unreadable. Between them, everything. Papers, assets, years of marriage reduced to ink. Marcus didn't look at Angela. He didn't need to. In his mind, this was already done. "Sign here," Richard said. Marcus picked up the pen. For a split second, his eyes moved across the page. Numbers, assets, ownership. That was all that mattered. He missed it. He signed. One clean stroke, no hesitation. And in that moment, he felt lighter, free, like he had just cut away everything holding him back. Angela watched him, not with anger, not with regret, with understanding. Because what Marcus felt as freedom was actually something else, a door closing, locking from the inside. Too late. Angela reached for the pen next. She didn't rush. Every movement was slow, deliberate, like she had already walked through this moment in her mind 100 times. The pen touched the paper, and just like that, it was done. Marcus leaned back, exhaling. "That's it?" Richard nodded. "That's it." Marcus smiled. Game over. That's what he thought. Angela stood up quietly. She didn't take anything, didn't say anything, just paused for half a second, her eyes resting on the documents, on the signatures, on the one detail no one in that room truly understood yet. Then she walked out and didn't look back. He thought he was walking away from a child, but he just signed away something far more valuable. What did he lose without even realizing it? He walked out of the courthouse with everything, and still had no idea he couldn't afford any of it. Because winning isn't about what you take, it's about what you can keep. And Marcus had just taken more than he could carry. The courthouse doors opened, and Marcus Hale stepped out into the bright Miami sunlight like a man who had just rewritten his future. His posture was loose, confident, his movements relaxed in a way that only comes from certainty. At 35, he looked exactly like success, sharp jawline catching the light, tailored suit fitting perfectly against his athletic frame, his stubble trimmed with precision. People passing by glanced at him without knowing why. He carried the energy of someone who believed he had just won something permanent. Behind him, his attorney Richard Cole followed at a slower pace, his expression far less celebratory. Richard adjusted his cuff slightly, eyes narrowing as if replaying something in his mind. Years of experience had taught him one thing. When something feels too easy, it usually isn't. But Marcus wasn't the kind of client who listened to doubt. He was the kind who moved forward before anyone could question him. "I told you," Marcus said, not even turning back. Richard gave a small nod, but his silence said more than agreement. Something was off. Marcus didn't notice, because parked right outside the courthouse was a sleek black convertible, and leaning casually against it was a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a completely different life. Her name was Chloe Winters. Chloe was 26, tall and striking, with long honey blonde hair that fell effortlessly over her shoulders, and skin that carried a soft golden glow. Her features were sharp but playful, her lips always slightly curved like she knew something others didn't. She dressed like attention followed her, fitted black dress, heels just high enough to demand presence, sunglasses resting on her head like an accessory rather than a necessity. But Chloe wasn't just beautiful, she was observant. She had learned early in life that aligning with the right people changed everything. And right now, Marcus was exactly the kind of man she aligned with. She smiled as he approached. "So, it's done?" Marcus smirked. "It's done." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel like a secret meant only for her. "I didn't divorce her." He paused, enjoying the moment. "I upgraded my life." Chloe laughed softly, slipping her arm through his. "I like that," she said. He thought he won. The mansion stood exactly as Marcus had imagined it, massive, modern, untouched by the quiet storm that had just passed through it. Glass walls reflected the ocean, marble floors gleamed under the afternoon light, and every corner carried the weight of wealth. Marcus walked in first, his footsteps echoing slightly in the open space. For a moment, he said nothing. He just looked. At the ceiling, at the view, at everything that now belonged to him. Chloe followed behind, her eyes scanning the room with open admiration. "Okay," she whispered. "This is insane." Marcus smiled. "I know." He moved through the space slowly, touching nothing, as if claiming it didn't require effort anymore. "This is mine now." "Everything?" Chloe asked. "Everything." That was his mistake. Later that evening, the house was no longer quiet. Music filled the air. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. Marcus stood at the center of it all, a drink in his hand, surrounded by people who didn't know the full story, but didn't need to. To them, he was a man who had just leveled up. Chloe stayed close to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her presence reinforcing the image he wanted the world to see. Freedom, upgrade, victory. He walked right into it. Across the room, a man stood near the bar, watching more than celebrating. His name was Victor Lang. Victor was in his early 50s, tall but slightly heavyset, his dark suit understated but expensive in a way that didn't need to be obvious. His hair was graying at the edges, his face marked by years of quiet observation rather than loud success. Victor wasn't part of Marcus's circle. He was part of something deeper, the financial structure behind properties like this. Land, leases, ownership layers most people never thought about. He held his drink loosely, eyes moving across the room before settling briefly on Marcus. Then the house, then back to Marcus. Victor didn't smile. He had seen this before. People celebrating assets they didn't fully understand. People confusing ownership with control. He missed it. Victor turned slightly, setting his glass down without finishing it. "Enjoy it while it lasts," he muttered quietly, not loud enough for anyone to hear, but enough for himself. Then he walked out. Upstairs, away from the noise, Marcus stood alone for a moment in the master bedroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened to the ocean, the same still surface reflecting back at him. He loosened his tie slightly, exhaling. For the first time all day, it was quiet. And in that silence, something flickered, a thought, brief, uncomfortable, then gone. Something was off. Marcus shook it away. He didn't question wins. He accepted them. Because in his world, things worked out when you took control. And today, he had taken everything. He owned the house. He owned the company. He owned the life he wanted. So why was there still something missing? What exactly did he not own that would cost him everything? He celebrated the house, but never once asked what it was standing on. Because people don't lose when they make the wrong move. They lose when they misunderstand the game. And Marcus wasn't playing the game Angela had already finished 20 years ago. The apartment was quiet. Not empty, just quiet in a way that felt intentional. Angela Brooks sat at a small wooden table near the window, the city lights outside reflecting faintly against the glass. The space was modest compared to the mansion she had left behind, but there was something different about it, something controlled. Nothing here was temporary. Nothing here was accidental. At 62, Angela didn't carry loss the way most people did. She didn't sit in regret. She didn't replay conversations. She moved forward the moment something ended. He had no idea. On the table in front of her lay a thin, worn folder. The edges were slightly faded, the paper inside aged but carefully preserved. Angela reached for it slowly, her fingers resting on the cover for a brief moment before opening it. Inside, stamped clearly across the top of the first page, were the words, "Land Trust, established 20 years ago." She looked at it without expression, but behind her eyes, everything was moving. 20 years earlier, Angela Brooks had not been the woman she was today. She had been younger, faster to trust, more willing to believe that success protected you from people. She learned the truth the hard way. His name had been Leonard Brooks, tall, charming, with a voice that made promises sound permanent. He had been the kind of man who didn't raise suspicion until he did. When their first business scaled, when the money started to come in, Leonard didn't celebrate. He shifted, quietly, strategically. Angela didn't notice at first, until one day she did. Accounts moved, documents changed, ownership blurred, and suddenly everything she had built wasn't entirely hers anymore. That was the lesson. She didn't scream, didn't fight publicly. She learned, and then she adapted. Back in the present, Angela turned another page in the folder. Precise legal structures filled the document, ownership layers, separation of assets, protections designed not just to hold wealth, but to control it. This wasn't just paperwork. This was architecture, invisible, permanent. "People see the house," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They never ask about the ground." A small sound broke the silence behind her. Ava stood near the doorway, barefoot, holding her stuffed rabbit. 5 years old, still quiet, still observant. She hadn't asked questions about the house, or her father. Children understood more than they said. Angela turned slightly, her expression softening just enough to be seen, but not enough to break. "Come here," she said gently. Ava walked over slowly, climbing onto the chair beside her. Her small eyes glanced down at the folder. "What is that?" she asked. Angela paused, then placed her hand lightly over the document. "This," she said, "this is something that makes sure no one can take what belongs to you." Ava didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway, because she trusted her. She saw it early. Angela closed the folder slowly, not hiding it, just finishing with it, for now. Across the city, the energy was different, louder, brighter. Marcus's mansion pulsed with music again, the aftermath of another night filled with people, drinks, and validation. Empty glasses lined the counters. Laughter echoed through rooms that no longer felt quiet. Marcus stood in the center of it all, exactly where he believed he belonged. Chloe sat nearby, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up at him with quiet satisfaction. Everything looked right, everything felt right, and that was the problem. Something was off. Marcus walked toward the window, looking out at the ocean. The same ocean Angela had looked at. But he didn't see what she saw. He saw ownership, victory, control. What he didn't see was structure, layers, time. Downstairs near the entrance, a man stepped quietly into the house. He wasn't invited, but he wasn't stopped. His name was Thomas Green, late 40s, average height, lean build, dressed in a simple gray suit that didn't draw attention. His hair was short, slightly unkempt, his face plain but focused. Thomas wasn't someone people noticed, and that was exactly why he was effective. He carried a small envelope in his hand, no expression, no urgency, just purpose. He was part of the system. Thomas didn't look around, didn't engage with anyone. He simply walked to the front desk and placed the envelope down. "For Mr. Hale," he said quietly, then turned and left. No explanation, no delay. Upstairs, Marcus still stood by the window. He ran his hand along the glass, exhaling slowly. Everything was exactly how he imagined it. And yet, that feeling returned, brief, sharp, uncomfortable, then gone again. Too late. Because Marcus didn't question victories, he accepted them, and that was why he never saw what was coming. He thought he owned the house, but ownership isn't about walls. It's about what's underneath them. So if the ground was never his, then what exactly did he just take? He finally moved into the house, and that's when it started costing him. Because owning something expensive is easy. Keeping it is where people break. And Marcus had just stepped into a life that looked rich, but was built to drain him. The first night in the mansion didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a statement. Music echoed through every open space, bass vibrating lightly through the marble floors as lights reflected off glass walls and polished surfaces. The ocean outside remained still, but inside, everything moved. Voices, laughter, glasses clinking, footsteps crossing rooms that had once been silent. Marcus Hale stood at the center of it all. He didn't just host the party, he was the reason for it. At 35, Marcus looked exactly like the life he had just claimed, sharp, composed, perfectly in control. His dark suit jacket had been discarded hours ago, sleeves rolled just enough to appear relaxed without losing form. A drink rested easily in his hand, his posture open, confident, the kind of man people gravitated toward without asking why. He thought this was success. Chloe Winters stayed close to him, her presence effortless but intentional. Her blonde hair fell loosely over her shoulders, catching the light as she moved, her smile quick, practiced, effective. She wasn't loud, but she didn't need to be. Chloe understood rooms, understood attention, and more importantly, she understood proximity. "You really did it," she said softly, leaning in just enough to be heard over the music. Marcus smirked. "I told you." People moved through the house like it belonged to them, too. Strangers laughed in corners. Friends explored rooms. Someone opened a bottle that probably cost more than most people's rent. And Marcus let it happen. Because this wasn't just a party, it was confirmation. Proof that he had stepped into something bigger. He walked right into it. Near the kitchen island, a man stood slightly apart from the crowd. His name was Ethan Cross, late 30s, lean, with sharp features that made him look more serious than he actually was. His short, dark hair was slightly unkempt, his shirt untucked just enough to suggest he didn't care. But his eyes gave him away. Observant, calculating. Ethan wasn't part of Marcus's inner circle, but he had been around long enough to understand how people like Marcus operated. "Nice place," Ethan said, lifting his glass slightly as Marcus approached. Marcus nodded. "Yeah." Ethan glanced around again, slower this time. "You planning to keep all this running the same way?" Marcus frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Ethan shrugged. "Just saying. Places like this don't run cheap." Marcus let out a short laugh. "I'm not worried about that." That was his mistake. Ethan held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded once. "All right." He didn't push it. People rarely did. Hours passed. The music got louder. The crowd got thinner. The night stretched into something slower, heavier. Upstairs, Marcus stepped into the master bedroom again, closing the door behind him. Silence. For the first time since the party started. He loosened his collar slightly, exhaling as he walked toward the window. The ocean hadn't changed. Still flat, still quiet. He stared at it longer this time, not because he wanted to, because something felt off. Something was off. It wasn't the house. The house was perfect. It wasn't the party. That had gone exactly how it should. It was something else, something he couldn't name, and that bothered him. Downstairs, the last of the guests began to leave. Chloe moved through the room slowly, checking her phone, her heels clicking lightly against the floor as she passed through empty spaces that had been full just hours earlier. Near the entrance, she paused. The envelope was still there, unopened. She picked it up, turning it slightly in her hand. Plain, no markings except a name. Marcus Hale. "That shouldn't be here," she muttered. Upstairs, Marcus heard her footsteps before she spoke. "Hey," Chloe said, stepping into the room. This was downstairs. She held out the envelope. Marcus glanced at it casually. Probably nothing. Spam, legal follow-up, something small. He took it without thinking. He still didn't see it. Marcus turned it over once, then set it down on the table beside him. Didn't open it, didn't care. Because in his mind, nothing could go wrong anymore. The room went quiet again. Too quiet. Marcus looked back at the ocean, his reflection staring faintly back at him. For a moment, just a moment, that feeling returned. Sharper this time, closer, then gone again. Too late. Because Marcus didn't question things that worked in his favor. He accepted them. He moved forward. He celebrated. And that was exactly why he never stopped to look at the one thing already waiting for him. He had the house. He had the life. He had everything he asked for. So why was the one thing he ignored, the only thing that could take it all away? What was inside that envelope that he didn't even bother to open? At exactly 12:01 a.m., the party ended. Not because the music stopped, not because the guests left, but because reality finally showed up, and it came with a signature. The house had gone quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels like something is about to happen. Marcus stood in the hallway, one hand loosely resting against the wall, the faint echo of the night still lingering in the air. The smell of alcohol, expensive perfume, and something heavier, something stale hung beneath the surface. Upstairs, Chloe had already fallen asleep, her silhouette faint behind the half-closed bedroom door. Everything looked exactly how it should after a night of celebration. But something didn't feel right. Something was off. Then the doorbell rang, sharp, sudden, out of place. Marcus frowned slightly, glancing toward the front door. Who the hell shows up at this hour? The bell rang again, shorter this time, more deliberate. That wasn't normal. Marcus walked toward the entrance slowly, barefoot against the cold marble floor, his movements quieter now, not cautious, but alert. When he opened the door, the night air hit him first, cool, still, empty. And standing there was a man who didn't belong to the night, the party, or anything inside the house. His name was Harold Finch, late 50s, thin to the point of looking almost fragile, with pale skin and a face that carried no expression at all. His gray suit was plain, slightly outdated, his tie neatly tightened as if he followed rules that no one else remembered anymore. His posture was straight, his eyes steady, not curious, not intimidated, just present. Harold wasn't important because of who he was. He was important because of what he carried. A document, folded, precise, final. "Mr. Hale?" he asked calmly. Marcus nodded once, already irritated. "What is this?" Harold didn't answer. He simply extended the paper. Legal notice. No explanation. No emotion. Marcus took it, almost dismissively, because in his world, legal notices didn't change anything. They never had before. Harold stepped back slightly. "Have a good night." Then he turned and left. Just like that. No waiting, no reaction. Gone. He didn't care. Marcus closed the door, barely thinking about it as he walked back inside. He didn't rush to open it, didn't feel urgency, didn't feel threat, because in his mind, nothing could touch him anymore. He tossed the envelope onto the table, walked past it, poured himself a drink, took a sip. Silence filled the room again. He still didn't see it. Then, slowly, his eyes drifted back to the envelope, just sitting there, still, waiting. Something about it felt heavier than it should. Marcus exhaled, annoyed at himself for even noticing. He walked over, picked it up, tore it open, and unfolded the document. His eyes moved across the first line, then the second, then the third. And that's when it happened. His face didn't drop immediately. It froze, like his brain hadn't caught up yet. Lease agreement expired. His eyes narrowed. What? He read further. Outstanding balance due immediately. The number hit him next. $720,000. His grip tightened. That doesn't make sense. He kept reading. Failure to comply will result in immediate eviction proceedings. Now his expression changed. Not confusion, not anger, something sharper. Panic trying to stay hidden. "I own this house." The words came out quieter than he expected, like he wasn't fully sure anymore. He flipped the page. More details, more numbers, monthly obligation, land lease, tax liabilities, everything stacked, everything real. That changed everything. Marcus stepped back slightly, the paper still in his hand. The room suddenly felt different, too big, too empty, too quiet. His eyes moved around the space, the walls, the floor, the glass, the house. Still there, still perfect, still his. But something underneath that certainty had just cracked. Something was wrong. Upstairs, Chloe stirred slightly, her voice faint as she called out, "Marcus?" He didn't answer, because for the first time since the divorce, Marcus wasn't in control anymore. He looked back down at the paper, reading it again, slower this time, carefully, as if the words might change. But they didn't. They stayed exactly the same, cold, final, unavoidable. Too late. Marcus lowered the paper slightly, his jaw tightening. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about what he had gained. He was thinking about what he had missed, and that was far worse. He thought he owned the house, so why was someone else asking him to pay for the ground? And if he didn't own the land beneath it, then what exactly did he just spend his entire life winning? He had everything on paper and nothing in reality. Because assets don't save you, cash does, and Marcus had just discovered the difference too late. Morning came without relief. The sunlight that once made the house look expensive now made it look exposed. Marcus hadn't slept, not really. He sat at the edge of the kitchen island, the same document from last night spread out in front of him like a verdict that refused to change. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair slightly disordered, for the first time since anyone could remember. The sharp, controlled image he always carried had cracks in it now. He owned assets, but had no cash. The words echoed in his head like something he should have understood sooner, but he didn't, and now it mattered. By mid-morning, Marcus was already on his third call. "No, you don't understand," he said, pacing again. "The property alone is worth over $20 million. On the other end, a calm, professional voice responded. Her name was Evelyn Carter, early 40s, composed, with a voice that didn't rise or fall no matter what she was told. Evelyn was a senior loan officer at a private bank, known for handling high-value clients, but more importantly, known for saying no without making it sound like rejection. Her tone was smooth, measured, trained to remain unaffected. "Mr. Hale," she said, "we've reviewed the documents." Marcus stopped walking. "And?" "There is no land ownership attached to the property," Evelyn replied. "That significantly impacts collateral value." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's still a $20 million house." "Technically," she said, "it's a structure on leased land." Silence. "And the lease has expired." "That's temporary," Marcus snapped. Evelyn didn't respond immediately, because she had heard this before. Clients who believed value came from perception, not structure. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "We won't be able to approve financing under these conditions." The call ended. Clean. Final. That door closed. Marcus stood still for a moment, then grabbed his phone again. Different number, different strategy. An hour later, he sat across from another man in a sleek downtown office. His name was Julian Price, late 40s, broad-shouldered, with a firm handshake and a face that looked permanently unimpressed. His hair was cut short, his beard trimmed close, his eyes direct to the point of discomfort. Julian didn't waste time, didn't entertain illusions. He had built his reputation by buying distressed assets, but only when they actually held value. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "I'm willing to sell fast," he said. Julian glanced at the file in front of him. "How fast?" "As soon as possible." Julian flipped a page, then another, then stopped. "This doesn't work." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "You don't own the land," Julian said flatly. "I can negotiate the lease." Julian shook his head once. "Then it's not a clean sale." Marcus leaned in more. "You're still getting the structure." Julian looked up at him now, direct, unfiltered. "No one buys a house they can be removed from." That landed, harder than anything before. "Then make an offer," Marcus pushed. Julian closed the file. "I just did." No deal. That option died. By afternoon, Marcus had exhausted logic. Now he turned to desperation. The company office felt different than it used to. Less stable, less certain. Marcus walked in fast, his steps sharper now, his presence carrying something heavier than confidence. Inside, a woman stood behind a desk, organizing files with quiet precision. Her name was Linda Park, mid-30s, slim, with straight black hair tucked neatly behind her ears and a calm demeanor that rarely changed. Linda had been with the company longer than Marcus, loyal, detail-oriented, the kind of employee who noticed everything but spoke only when necessary. She had seen the numbers before anyone else. "Linda," Marcus said quickly, "I need to pull funds, immediately." She paused, just slightly, then looked up at him. "How much?" $700,000. Silence. Not hesitation. Calculation. "That's not possible," she said. Marcus frowned again. "What do you mean, not possible?" Linda stepped closer, placing a report in front of him. "The company hasn't been profitable for the last 2 quarters. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Ongoing liabilities," she continued. "Operational costs increased. Revenue declined." Marcus flipped through the pages. Numbers, losses, trends, all real, all ignored. "You should have known." "I wasn't handling operations," Marcus said, his voice tightening. Linda didn't respond, because that wasn't her problem. Marcus stood there, the weight finally settling in fully, not all at once, but enough. The house couldn't be sold. The bank wouldn't lend. The company couldn't cover it. Every path he thought he had was gone. He started to see it. That evening, back at the mansion, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Marcus stood in the middle of the living room, looking around slowly. Everything still looked expensive, still looked like success, but now he understood something he hadn't before. Looking rich and being liquid were not the same thing. Too late. He had a $20 million house, but couldn't get a single dollar out of it. So if everything he owned couldn't save him, then what exactly was it worth when he needed it most? He ran to court to take it back, and that's when he realized there was nothing to take. Because this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't fraud. It was something far worse. It was intentional. The courtroom was colder than Marcus expected, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Everything felt controlled, measured, final. Marcus Hale pushed through the doors with urgency, his steps sharper than usual, his composure finally cracking under pressure. His suit was still expensive, still tailored, but now slightly creased, slightly rushed, like the man wearing it had lost the time to maintain appearances. His jaw was tight, his eyes restless, scanning everything like he was looking for something to grab onto. "This is fraud!" His voice cut through the room before he even fully stepped forward. Heads turned, quietly, not shocked, just attentive. Because in a courtroom, volume doesn't win, structure does. At the front, seated behind the bench, was Judge Eleanor Whitman, mid-60s, tall even while seated, with silver hair pulled tightly back and a face that carried no unnecessary expression. Her eyes were sharp, not unkind, but completely uninterested in emotion. She had spent over 30 years in the system, long enough to recognize patterns before people finished speaking. Marcus's outburst didn't move her, not even slightly. "Mr. Hale," she said calmly, "you will lower your voice." Marcus clenched his jaw but stepped forward. "This entire agreement is misleading," he said, forcing control back into his tone. "I was transferred a property that I cannot legally sustain. Critical information was withheld." Judge Whitman didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced down at the file in front of her. Pages turned, carefully, deliberately. That was the difference. The doors behind Marcus opened again. Angela Brooks walked in. No rush, no reaction, just presence. At 62, she looked exactly the same as she had the day she signed the papers. Composed, upright, her movements controlled, her expression neutral. Her silver hair framed her face with quiet authority, her dark skin smooth and steady under the courtroom lights. She wore a simple, elegant black suit. Nothing loud, nothing unnecessary. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't need to. She already knew how this would end. She took her seat, calmly. Beside her sat a man Marcus hadn't seen before. His name was Leonard Voss, the same man from the office, now present, now visible. Leonard sat still, his posture straight, his hands resting lightly on the table. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes were focused, precise, like someone who didn't come to react, but to confirm. He wasn't a lawyer. He was something else. Structure, control, the part Marcus had never seen. Judge Whitman looked up. "Mr. Hale," she said, "you claim the agreement is fraudulent. Please clarify." Marcus stepped forward, his voice tighter now. "I was transferred ownership of a property valued at over $20 million, he said. "But the land it sits on is not included. That was never made clear." Silence. Short. Measured. Judge Whitman turned her attention to Angela. "Ms. Brooks," she said, "did you transfer the house to Mr. Hale?" Angela nodded once. "Yes." No hesitation, no defense, just fact. Pause. Then, "But not the land." The room didn't explode. It didn't react loudly. It didn't need to. Because silence was louder. He felt it. Marcus turned toward her instantly. "What does that even mean?" Angela didn't raise her voice, didn't shift her posture. "The structure was transferred," she said. "The land remains under a separate trust." Marcus shook his head. "That was never explained." Now Judge Whitman spoke again. "It was documented," she said. Marcus froze. "What?" Judge Whitman lifted a page from the file. "Clause 14, Section B," she read. Property structure transfer excludes underlying land ownership, which remains under pre-existing trust agreement. Each word landed slower than the last. He signed it. Marcus stared at her, then at the document, then back at Angela. "You knew," he said. Angela met his gaze for the first time. Calm, steady. Yes. No emotion, no apology, just truth. That was the moment. Marcus stepped back slightly. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like something had closed around him. "You set this up," he said. Angela didn't respond immediately, because she didn't need to defend something that wasn't illegal. "I agreed to your terms," she said finally, "exactly as you requested." That hit harder than anything else, because it was true. Every word, every clause, every decision. Marcus had asked for everything, and she gave it to him. Exactly. Judge Whitman placed the document back down. "There is no evidence of fraud," she said. "The agreement is valid and enforceable. Final, clean, unchallenged." That ended it. Marcus didn't speak again, because there was nothing left to say. He didn't lose in court. He lost long before he walked in, and only now did he understand when. He asked for everything, and she gave it to him exactly as he wanted. So if this wasn't fraud, then was this ever a mistake, or was it a trap he walked into on his own? He thought he lost in court, but the truth was he was never part of the deal. Because this wasn't about taking something from him, it was about making sure he could never touch what mattered. The courtroom had emptied, but the weight of what happened didn't leave with the people. It stayed. Marcus stood near the exit, motionless, the noise of footsteps fading behind him. His face had changed, not dramatically, not visibly broken, but something deeper had shifted. The confidence that once defined him was gone. What remained was something unfamiliar. Understanding. Too late. Angela Brooks walked past him without stopping, calm, untouched, like nothing had been taken from her, because nothing had. "You knew," Marcus said, his voice lower now, no longer aggressive, just searching. Angela paused, then turned. For the first time, there was something different in her expression. Not anger, not satisfaction, clarity. 20 years ago, she said quietly, I stopped trusting people. Silence settled between them. Not heavy, just final. They moved into a smaller private room adjacent to the courtroom, away from the last lingering observers. The space was simple, plain walls, a single table, neutral lighting that revealed everything without emphasizing anything. Angela took a seat. Marcus remained standing for a moment before slowly sitting across from her. Between them now, no lawyers, no judge, no audience, just truth. Angela folded her hands lightly on the table. What you saw, she began, was never the full structure. Marcus didn't interrupt, because now he needed to hear it. The land, Angela said, has never been part of any marital asset. Her tone was calm, measured. The land was placed into a trust 20 years ago. Marcus frowned slightly. A trust? Angela nodded once. Yes. She leaned back slightly, her posture relaxed, not defensive, not guarded. After my first business nearly collapsed, she continued, I learned something important. Ownership is visible, control is not. That was the lesson. Angela reached into her bag and placed a document on the table. Marcus looked down, then back at her. What is this? The trust agreement, she said. Marcus picked it up slowly. His eyes moved across the page. Names, structures, legal language. Then he saw it. Beneficiary, Ava Brooks, his daughter, 5 years old. His breath caught slightly. What is this? He asked again, but quieter this time. Angela didn't look away. The land belongs to the trust, she said, and the trust belongs to her. Silence, longer this time. He read further. Trustee, Angela Brooks. That meant control, decision-making, access, everything. You built this before me? Angela nodded. long before you. Marcus leaned back slowly, the paper still in his hand. So what did I actually get? Angela didn't hesitate. A structure, she said. Pause. Sitting on someone else's land. The words landed differently now. Not confusing, not abstract, real. Marcus looked down at the document again, his grip loosening slightly. Everything he thought he had taken was only part of something much bigger, something he was never included in. He was never meant to be. Why? Marcus asked finally, not accusing, just needing to understand. Angela's gaze softened slightly, not emotionally, but intentionally. Because I don't build things to be taken, she said. I build them to last. Her eyes flickered briefly, especially for her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, because there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to challenge. Marcus hadn't been tricked. He hadn't been lied to. He had been outstructured. He stood up slowly, placing the document back on the table. The movement was different now, less certain, less controlled, because control was never his. Angela remained seated, still calm, still steady, because for her, this conversation wasn't the end. It was confirmation. Marcus turned toward the door, then stopped. For just a second. Not long enough to speak, but long enough to realize something he should have understood from the beginning. This wasn't about losing money, or assets, or status. It was about never understanding the system he thought he had mastered. Too late. Angela watched him leave, not with victory, not with relief, but with certainty, because everything had gone exactly as it was always meant to. He thought he took everything, but the only thing that mattered was never his to begin with. So if the future was already written, was he ever winning, or just playing a game he didn't even understand? He thought he had taken her life, but all he really took was the part she no longer needed. Because the most dangerous move in a negotiation is not losing. It's winning the wrong thing. The hallway outside the private room felt narrower now, the air heavier, as if the building itself had absorbed what had just happened. Marcus walked slowly, not with purpose anymore, but with weight. The confidence that once drove his steps had been replaced by something unfamiliar, hesitation. Behind him, the sound of heels approached, steady, measured, unrushed. Angela Brooks. She didn't call his name. She didn't need to. Marcus stopped anyway. He didn't turn immediately, because part of him already knew this wasn't over. Angela stepped closer, her presence quiet but absolute. At 62, she didn't rely on force or volume. Her power came from certainty. Her silver hair framed her face with precision, her posture straight, her expression calm in a way that didn't ask for attention, but commanded it. Marcus turned slowly to face her. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Angela closed the distance between them, just enough, not aggressive, not emotional, intentional. You didn't take my wealth. Her voice was low, clear, controlled. Marcus held her gaze, his jaw tightening slightly. Angela continued, You took my liabilities. Silence, not empty, sharp. The kind that forces understanding whether you want it or not. Marcus blinked once. The words didn't hit like an attack. They hit like truth. Everything replayed in his mind at once. The house, the company, the numbers, the debt. Every asset he fought for was carrying something underneath it, something he never asked about, something she never stopped him from taking. That was the design. You gave me everything, Marcus said, but his voice no longer carried certainty. Angela nodded once. Yes. No defense, no explanation, just confirmation. Marcus exhaled slowly, looking away for the first time, because now he understood something far more dangerous than loss. He hadn't been beaten. He had been allowed. And that was worse. Angela stepped back slightly, not retreating, just finished. There was nothing left to say, because everything that needed to be understood already was. Marcus remained still, the weight settling deeper now. Not shock, not anger, just clarity. Late, permanent. Too late. Angela turned and walked away, not looking back, because she didn't need to see the result of something she had already planned years ago. He thought he took her power, but all he really took was everything she had already removed from her life. So if she lost nothing, then why did he lose everything the moment he won? He didn't lose everything at once. He lost it piece by piece until there was nothing left to hold on to. Because collapse isn't loud, it's systematic, and Marcus had already triggered every part of it. The first notice came with a deadline. The second came with consequences. The third came with enforcement. Marcus stood in the center of the mansion, the same place where music once filled the air, now holding a final document that didn't ask anymore. It stated. His face had changed again, not in appearance, but in presence. The sharp confidence was gone completely now, replaced by tension that sat in his jaw, in his shoulders, in the way he moved like every step required thought. Eviction proceedings initiated. He read the line twice, then a third time, as if repetition could change outcome. It didn't. That was the end of the house. 2 men entered shortly after. No drama, no raised voices, just procedure. The first was named Carl Benton, early 50s, broad build, shaved head, wearing a standard enforcement jacket that made him look less like a person and more like a function. His face carried no hostility, but no sympathy either. This wasn't personal to him. It never was. Beside him stood a younger man, Noah Ellis, late 20s, lean, slightly tense, still new enough to the job to feel something, but trained enough not to show it. "Mr. Hale," Carl said calmly, "we need you to vacate the property." Marcus didn't move. "I own this house," he said again, but this time the words sounded hollow. Carl didn't react. "You no longer have legal right to occupy it," he replied. Final, clear, unarguable. That closed the door. Marcus walked out of the house without looking back, because now he couldn't. The company fell next, not in a single moment, but faster than it should have. Marcus sat in the office, staring at reports that now made sense too late. The losses, the declining margins, the obligations he had ignored. Without Angela's structure behind it, the company wasn't stable. It was exposed. Linda stood across from him again, her posture the same as always, calm, controlled, but her eyes carried something new. Distance. "We can't sustain operations," she said quietly. Marcus didn't respond immediately. "Try," he said. Linda shook her head once. "It's already past that." No argument, no emotion, just fact. That ended the company. The calls stopped after that, not gradually, suddenly. People who once responded instantly didn't. Contacts who once reached out disappeared. Because Marcus had been valuable. Now he wasn't. He lost relevance. Chloe left without confrontation. No fight, no scene, just absence. Marcus returned to the temporary apartment one evening to find her things gone. The space felt colder without explanation, like something had been removed without needing permission. On the table sat a short note. No name, no emotion, just a sentence. "I didn't sign up for this." Marcus read it once, then placed it down, because there was nothing to respond to. That ended her. Days blurred together after that. No structure, no plan, just consequence. Marcus sat alone in a space that no longer reflected who he thought he was. The suits remained, but they didn't carry the same weight. The phone remained, but it didn't ring. Everything external had been removed, and what was left was nothing he recognized. He finally saw it. Across the city, life moved differently. Angela Brooks walked through a quiet park, Ava beside her, small hand wrapped gently in hers. The air was lighter here, the pace slower, the world not built on display, but on intention. Ava laughed softly, pointing at something in the distance, her voice light, untouched by anything that had happened. Angela looked down at her, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed something softer to exist. Not victory, not relief, just continuation. because what she built was never meant to collapse. Marcus sat alone that same evening, staring at nothing in particular, not thinking about what he lost, but finally understanding why. Too late. He took the house. He took the company. He took everything he thought mattered. And one by one, it all disappeared. So if losing everything wasn't the worst part, then what exactly was left of him when there was nothing left to lose? He lost the house, but the story didn't end there, because real revenge isn't taking something back. It's waiting until it's worth nothing, and then owning it again. The ocean looked different from the other side of the city. Not closer, not clearer, but quieter. Angela Brooks stood on a small balcony, the early morning light soft against her skin, the air still carrying that same calm it always had. But now it felt earned. At 62, she no longer watched things for what they appeared to be. She watched for what they would become. Beside her, Ava leaned against the railing, her small fingers gripping the edge as she stared out at the water. Her curly hair moved slightly with the breeze, her expression curious, untouched by the weight of everything that had unfolded. "Is that our house?" Ava asked softly, pointing toward the distant coastline. Angela followed her gaze. For a moment, she didn't answer, because the truth was more complex than the question. Across town, the mansion no longer felt like a symbol of success. It felt like an asset waiting to be reclaimed. Inside, a woman walked slowly through the empty space, her heels clicking lightly against the marble floor. Her name was Victoria Hale, early 50s, tall and sharply composed, with dark auburn hair cut precisely at her shoulders, and a face that carried both elegance and authority. Her eyes were observant, her movements efficient, someone used to evaluating value quickly and acting without hesitation. Victoria wasn't emotionally attached to places. She assessed them. She paused in the center of the living room, glancing around once. "Structure's intact," she said calmly. Behind her stood a younger man, clipboard in hand. "Land lease still unresolved," he replied. Victoria nodded slightly, "which is exactly why it's cheap." That changed the value. Back on the balcony, Angela finally spoke. "Not yet," she said softly. Ava looked up at her. "Will it be?" Angela's gaze stayed on the horizon. Then she knelt slightly, bringing herself level with her daughter. "One day," she paused, "not for effect, for certainty. We'll buy it back." Ava blinked. "Really?" Angela nodded once, "for less than what he paid to take it." Miles away, Marcus sat alone in a dim, temporary apartment that still didn't feel like a place anyone planned to stay. The walls were bare, the air heavy, the silence no longer unfamiliar, just constant. He stared at a screen in front of him. Auction notice, property listing, reduced valuation. The same house, the same place, but not the same number. That was the shift. Marcus leaned back slowly, his eyes fixed on the listing as if it might disappear. It didn't, because this time, it wasn't his to lose anymore. A quiet knock came at the door. Marcus didn't move at first. Then, reluctantly, he stood and opened it. A man stood outside, mid-40s, average height, wearing a clean but unremarkable suit. His name was Samuel Reed. Samuel had the kind of face people forgot easily. Neutral, composed, professional. But his eyes were sharp, always focused, always aware. He wasn't there to negotiate. He was there to deliver outcomes. "Mr. Hale," he said politely, "I represent an interested buyer." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Good for them." Samuel nodded slightly. "They've requested a full inspection and valuation review." Marcus almost laughed. "Take it." Samuel studied him for a second, then nodded again. "Understood." He turned and walked away. No pressure, no urgency, because none was needed. Marcus closed the door slowly. The room felt smaller now, not physically, mentally, because for the first time, he understood something deeper than loss. He hadn't just lost assets, he had lost position, and without position, everything else followed. He saw it clearly now. Back on the balcony, Angela stood again, Ava's hand in hers. The ocean remained calm, unchanged, because it never reacted. It simply waited, just like she had. Too late for him, he paid everything to take it, and now someone else was about to buy it for less. So if she ends up owning it again, did she ever lose anything, or was this always how it was going to end? He didn't lose because he was unlucky. He lost because he never asked the right question. He saw a $20 million house, but never asked who owned the ground. And that's the difference between looking rich and being in control. Greed doesn't make people rich. It makes them blind to what actually matters. Now tell me this, was Marcus greedy or just stupid? Comment your answer. And if you like stories like this, hit subscribe, because the next one is even worse.